Hey, this is a special Friday episode of Geek Out. Jake and I wanted to talk to our friend David Brothers, who's editor over at Viz Media. So that's what this week's special episode is. So hope you check it out. And coming back on the show, we have David Brothers, editor over at Viz, and just, a friend of ours, and we just kind of wanted to, we miss talking to our friends, so we just wanted to kind of to check in, and yeah, we knew that we wouldn't see you at San Diego this year, man, so we just kind of wanted to keep that 3-time-a-year tradition kind of running.
Yeah.
I might actually be at San Diego on Thursday.
Oh.
Jake, you're actually at San Diego this year.
I'll be at San Diego this year.
I got invited, but I couldn't actually make it work out, so which is kind of a shame because a book that I worked on is actually up for an Eisner, which might be the only time that in my life that ever happens.
Tell us the name of the book, man.
Beowulf. It was through Image. It was the Image translation that I did with Santiago Garcia and David Rubin. That came out, last January, and the paperback comes out on September 19th. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool, man.
Pretty fucking sweet.
Remember when we just, sat around and talked about Superman? And now you're like, oh, I translated a book that's up for an Eisner.
Anyone that can speak. I just happen to be the lucky guy that did it. Anybody that can speak Spanish can do it. But I
couldn't do it.
But do you speak Spanish?
No.
See,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But yeah, David, I wanted to start this off with the big question. First off, congrats to your Warriors for winning the NBA Finals.
Yeah, back to back.
Yes, yeah. My big question, possibly the most important one I'll ask on the history of this podcast, is where do you think LeBron goes next?
Man, I think the Sixers would be cool because of the narrative.
Yeah.
Trust the process, like a team going from one of the worst records in the league to having a really scrappy rookie crew and then getting the greatest basketball player of our time.
Yeah.
That's amazing. The Lakers look kind of likely because Paul George and Kawhi Leonard might end up there.
Didn't he just start his kids in Los Angeles too, or didn't he just buy a house out there or something?
I mean, he's had a house out there because LeBron is disgustingly rich. He got $1 billion from Nike for a lifetime endorsement.
So that means the Lakers will win for the next decade.
Yeah, LeBron and Kawhi on the same team, that's an extinction level event, is what that is. And also, Lakers fans have enough rings.
That's true.
They're already I love the Magic era. I grew up on Showtime Lakers because they had that kind of a small rivalry with Dominique Wilkins was big around the same time, and he was my dude when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But Lakers fans can be insufferable sometimes.
Not just Lakers fans. I mean, you have to keep in mind I'm a Wizards fan, and they never make it past the first round of the playoffs, so we're pretty secure in our fragile masculinity in that regard.
I grew up on the Hawks, same thing. We were first round and out until 2 or 3 years ago, and they had an amazing record, and then LeBron still destroyed them in the playoffs.
Yeah. So wait, did you not think? I mean, because when LeBron first signed on to the Heat, with Miami, they were running hot too. They had Bosh. They had Dwayne Wade.
Dwayne Wade, yeah. That was a monster team, but it didn't dominate the way the Warriors have. Even if the Warriors don't win the most amount of games per season, watching the Warriors play with teams is like watching a cat play with a mouse sometimes.
Well, I remember, was it last year where it was clear that it was going to be the Warriors Cavaliers again, and the Cavaliers just crushed in the playoffs. I don't think they lost the game, and then they go up against
Golden State,
and they lose, and it's just God. I mean, my knowledge of basketball is pretty limited. I go back to David Robinson's basketball game on the Game Gear. That was my favorite thing of all time. I love the Admiral. David Robinson's my favorite basketball player. I love that guy. I don't know. It's kind of cool. This is our Celtic Lakers. Because it's Warriors and Cavaliers. Do you find that boring, or do you find that interesting that it's been this way for 4 years in a row now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because both teams are really good. LeBron has been to 8 straight NBA finals.
That's insane.
Yeah, that alone is oh my goodness. And the Warriors are obviously, they're extremely good at making games turn their way.
Yeah.
If the Warriors are down 5 at halftime, technically they're going to be up 10, before you know it. And so for me, like, I love watching basketball. I'll see a nice assist to be like, oh, like, I gotta, make sure I catch that on the highlights later. Even though it's not as exciting as a slam dunk, there's still something to appreciate there.
Yeah.
So I think when one team is so good that they're dominating everyone else, the fun part comes in the season after, when every team has their anti-Warriors, like, plan ready to go. Bringing it out of, like, the mad scientist vault. Like, Popovich versus the Warriors is always going to be interesting. LeBron versus the Warriors is always going to be interesting. Even as much as I hate to admit it, like, Chris Paul and James Harden on the Rockets made that a really interesting series, even though they ended up getting crushed by the end of it.
Yeah. I just keep thinking Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just think excellence breeds excellence.
Yeah. I think it's fun because all I do is, like, I keep thinking in, like, 15 years from now when I'm watching the 30 for 30 about, like, this reign of, like, Steph Curry and LeBron James just going back and forth and, like, having all these talking head interviews about stuff we had no idea what was going on. Like, it's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, like, what's the aftermath with J.R. Smith? Because no disrespect to Steph, because Steph played out of his mind in that series, but there's the most iconic image to come out of that series is, like, LeBron reacting to Smith,
Yeah, and I really think that's when they lost the finals.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the shot heard around the world, which is the kill the clock heard around the world.
You can't help but, like, just put yourself in J.R. Smith's shoes and just feel like the worst. Like, all I could think about was, like, dude, that guy. Oh my God, man. Like,
yeah. Did you see the video after that happened of them on the bench?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really rough.
Yeah, that was bad, man. Like, it's a no-win there.
Yeah, a friend said, I think he got this online or something, but it really made sense. That's the point when someone on the team should have been like, that happened, but we still have overtime left, and we're still really good at basketball.
That's the thing, too, because, like, that'll kill, like, back when Bill Buckner had the famous ball between his legs at Fenway Park, and the Mets ended up winning that game, like, the Mets didn't win the World Series in that game. Like, there was another game to play, you know what I mean? So, like, there's a lot to be said about that, where, like, there was still more baseball to play, but the crippling, damning effect of a play or a mishap or an error, that was game one, right?
Yeah.
Like, that runs
like, that was a morale
deep.
murderer.
Yeah, and like you said, there was still overtime to play. Like, when I first watched that, I thought that was it. Like, I didn't have any context to it. Like, I saw it the next day, and I was like, oh, okay. But then I realized they were like, no, there's, like, overtime to play. And I'm like, see, that's where it doesn't matter how good you are sometimes. That kind of error, that kind of mistake will just cripple even someone, as talented as the Cavaliers were in the playoffs.
Yeah, and, like, I felt really bad. This is going to sound weird, but I felt bad for LeBron in this finals because he really balled out.
Yeah.
And just I think the Cavs front office over the course of this season, like, they just couldn't handle all of the stuff that was thrown at them. Because it feels like forever ago, but, like, Kyrie Irving left the Cavs this season.
Yeah.
They brought in Jordan Clarkson and all those other dudes this season.
Yeah. I mean, this entire year has kind of felt like dog years, because if you think about it, you were on, like, the last time you and I talked, I mean, we've interacted online, sure, but the last time you and I talked, and, occasionally I'll maybe, like, text you a picture from Popeyes, but, like, the last time you and I talked was, like, 4 months ago, but it feels like fucking dog years, man.
Yeah, so much has happened. Like, Kanye came back, and then we were like, all right, cool, Kanye's being interesting on Twitter. And then we were like, oh, no, like, we got to get Kanye off Twitter.
Didn't he fire his PR team or something? He's like, I can't.
He did.
Yeah. But the Kid Cudi album makes up for it, though, right?
I think so. Like, that might actually be my album of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
It's when I realized I'd listened to it for a week straight at the expense of everything else I wanted to listen to. I was like, oh, no. Like, it's resonating. I can't let this happen again.
But it's such a short record. It's like, what, less than, like, 25 minutes or something, all across, like, 7 tracks?
Yeah, it's like 23, which I didn't memorize the runtime, but I'm working on a podcast. I want to have the same runtime for secret reasons right now.
Of course.
Yeah, so I was looking it up earlier today.
What's your favorite track on it?
It's super cliche, but I think Reborn.
Me too, man. Me too. And that's coming right off Free. I mean, they're spiritually linked.
And even leading into Cudi Montage, like, it's still, it's all good, but Reborn is the one where I'm just like, this is just right.
It's the anthem it's the song that we need right now. That, like, hey man, you nothing's gonna stop you. You're gonna keep moving forward, always forward. That's the yeah, and it's like smack dab in the middle of the record too. And yeah, it was just kind of like, oh, this is the one. This is the winner.
And there's a line when he says like, "Peace starts with me, peace begins with me." I forget the exact phrasing right now, but like that's a point where I was like I gasped in real life.
Those are the
it
best
just hit me
moments,
that
man.
hard. Yeah.
It just kind of hit me where I live. Yeah.
That's the best. Like when I listen to an album, sometimes like I don't do it as much anymore. But when I used to like buy like CDs, which sounds horrible, but like I'm like that like indie nerd now that like if I buy something physical, it's on vinyl because I bought like a big player and everything like that.
It justifies the purchase.
Yeah, but like
same here.
But like I would sit and like read the lyrics along with listening to it for the first time, and I always love those moments where like you hit like a line in a song, you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's like, you stop playing. Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah,
I just wanted something to listen to.
yeah, it's freaking nuts. I remember the first time I listened to Bring It On Home by Led Zeppelin off Led Zeppelin 2. I was sitting on the bed, and like Led Zeppelin, as they do, pretty much stole the whole song from somebody else. But like, you hear it, and it's just like this kind of like little bluesy number, and then Jimmy Page comes roaring in with this riff, and I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my god!" Like I wanted to run into my tell my parents about this song, and they're like, "Yeah, we were alive in the '70s when Led Zeppelin happened, dude. It's 1995 or whatever." But yeah, I can like seriously remember. I have a terrible memory, but I can remember moments in my life based on like listening to a song for the first time. Like in
That's
like
the time capsule.
Hearing like a riff or like a line or something like that. That's just the best.
Yeah, definitely. And there's always, especially with rap music, I feel, because so much of it is based around wordplay. Like I love the moments in a song that are so good that make you frown. You're just like, I can't believe this dude thought of this, and I can't believe that they thought of it before I did. One of those.
Yeah. Just like how like insanely clever, but like it should be so like obvious at the same time. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. It's like the Batman looking at one of Riddler's puzzles and being like, this is actually a pretty good one. I respect what he's doing here.
I'm still gonna punch you in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're a weakling compared to me.
There was that thing where like I don't know if it was like Rebirth era or New 52 era where they tried to make like the Riddler like young and like hot and like kind of jacked, and I'm just like, dude, why? Like of all the villains, like.
Do you remember when metrosexual was a thing?
I mean, I'm a poster boy for it. Yeah, of course.
But we don't call it that anymore. Now we just say, he's just a straight guy who like knows how to dress.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I wouldn't go that far in my own case, but yeah.
There was a point where they revamped the Riddler as a guy who wore like a black turtleneck and black slacks, and they called him the metrosexual. Well, fans called him the metrosexual Riddler.
Jesus.
It was actually my favorite take on the character. This was probably like 2004, because it became all about the riddles again. He was like, "Look, I'm not a supervillain." It was post Hush. That's what kind of kicked everything off, because like he betrayed all the bad guys, and I think Poison Ivy poisoned him or Ivied him something. But he got back to basics. He's like, "I'm going to make puzzles, make riddles. I'm going to get money, and I'm going to escape scot-free. Like that's all I really need out of life," and it worked.
I think it was, because he opens up his, like, own detective agency. He's like, I'm Edward Nygma. Come to me with your problems, and I'll solve them. Like, he was like fucking Vanilla Ice. Yo, I'll solve it. And he doesn't. Like, I mean, he does, but, like, Batman's like, you're doing some shady shit behind the scenes. Which I feel like it was, like, low-key, like, an episode straight out of the animated series. And they just kind of, like, because Warner Brothers is Warner Brothers, they're like, just... we'll call it an homage. If anybody calls us on it, we'll be fine.
Yeah, the Alan Moore rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was goodness. He was so good on the cartoon too.
Yeah,
I really love the Riddler.
He had the best episodes, like the fucking virtual reality with like the Minotaur and
And
stuff.
he was voiced by Lionel Luthor from Smallville, right?
John Glover.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I even love Frank Gorshin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He is so good. Sam and I, this is years ago now. Like we, when you bought the Blu-ray, like the Blu-ray Adam West series.
When they first released that in 2015.
Yeah, and I remember watching that first episode, which is a Riddler episode, and like first of all, how good that series looks on Blu-ray. Like, most of the time when like an album gets remastered or like something gets remastered, it doesn't really fucking look any different. You know what I mean? Like you'll sit there and be like, I'm convincing myself I paid $20 for this album to buy a second time. Like, when it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But like, God, that Blu-ray is ridiculous. And I always like half jokingly joke that like Frank Gorshin's Riddler is the best Joker on the 60s animated series, you know what I mean? Because he's so freaking nuts. Like, he's great. He's so good on that.
Yeah. Almost like contortioning the entire time, too. Just like, yeah. He's like fucking Valdo from Soul Calibur. You expect him to just kind of like crawl along the floor.
What I love about the Riddler, which must piss him off so much, because like my favorite Batman villain is Bane, and it's really just because of Nightfall. I mean, that's really it, right? I mean, like, I haven't really...
I mean, that's the only reason why anyone likes Bane.
Yeah, pretty much.
Batman and Robin.
Yeah. Bomb. But, Riddler's whole thing for the longest time is, like, who is Batman? And Bane figures it out in, like, 5 seconds by looking at him. And Riddler must have been like, God damn it, That's one of my favorite... I was talking about a line that blew me away when I first read Nightfall as a kid. I don't remember the exact line. I'll probably butcher it. But when Bane sees Batman in action, like, he watches him from, like...
Afar.
Like, he just sees him kick a bunch of guys' asses. And he notices he doesn't kill him. Like, Batman doesn't kill any of them. And so he goes down and he confronts him. And he's like, what's the commandment for thou shalt not kill? Is
that's it?
No, what number is it?
Oh, it's like 3 or 4.
Okay.
Guess. It's not number 1.
Yeah, it's not. We'll say it's 3, just for the sake of the quote. And, like, he looks at Batman and he's like, you refuse to break the 3rd commandment, but yet they all fear you. He's like, how? Like, I love that shit. Like, and then, yeah, just the interaction between, like, that's the thing. I think a lot of things with Bane that they got wrong. I'm super behind on the Tom King. Like, I started the Bane stuff. I haven't really dove into it enough to, like, come up with my own conclusion on it. But I really like Tom King. But they always focus on that he broke Batman's back and that he's, like, jacked. But they don't focus on the fact that, like, the dude's a genius. Like, that's the thing that made Nightfall so great. Like, he goes out of his way to just, like, get Batman beaten by every other villain that he releases from Arkham, and then waits for him in Wayne Manor in his fucking house, dude. Like, he breaks into his house and he beats him for an entire issue. Like, I think that's the thing that people always forget. Like, he's so smart, and Batman even notices that too. Like, he's just as smart as any of his other villains, but he happens to be this Olympic-sized bodybuilder freak, And I think that's the thing that makes him so scary and so cool. And he looks like the luchador mask thing is always pretty cool. I always like that.
Did you read the issues where Bane thought he might be Bruce Wayne's brother?
Yeah.
No, which is that?
It was like Shadow of the Bat or something.
Yeah, or like Gotham Knights, one of those anthology series they used to do.
Yeah.
I remember it being a more interesting idea than Execution.
Okay.
Yeah. The idea was like Thomas Wayne like did his like medical residency or something in Santa Prisca.
Oh,
and
okay.
might have fucked Bane's mom.
Yeah, that's totally it.
Well, that was funny too, because like that was one of the funny things about Dark Knight Rises, is that if you were a fan of comic books and like Bane, you're watching that movie going, yeah, this little kid is Bane, because like that's his story. And it's funny because like it's a real twist for people who read comic books. You know what I mean? Because like the whole time, like you're going, yeah, okay, little kid, he, his takes on his father's, mantle or his prison sentence, which is so fucked, born into a prison and swimming every night and all that kind of stuff, which I always liked. I thought that was a cool thing Chris Nolan did, where it's like you're going to take Bane's origin and then it's not going to be Bane's origin, which I thought was kind of cool. And I really dug Tom Hardy's performance. Like, I know the voice thing was kind of ridiculous, but he's the second most ridiculous voice in that movie.
Yeah, I thought he had there was like a menace in his jauntiness.
Yeah, well, the thing, I remember reading an article after I saw it, where, first of all, it was kind of cool, but they were talking about the wardrobe of Bane, where, like, when they find Commissioner Gordon and they throw him in the freaking, Gotham sewers or whatever, Bane is, like, shirtless and, like, jacked and crazy. And, like, kind of like the reborn Bane. And then throughout the movie, by the end, he earns the dictator jacket. Like, he goes from, like, newborn to whatever. But then also, like, another thing that I love about Tom Hardy and just mask acting in general, like, I'm such a nerd for that stuff. Like, anyone acting behind a mask, whether it's prosthetic or anything, is that whenever he would play anger, his eyes would play sorrow. and like he wouldn't go for the obvious thing. Like, yeah, there's a couple moments where he, probably just can't help it, but he would always. And then, like, dude, he makes it believable that Bane rolls a tear in a Batman movie. Like in the end of that movie where like Talia's like friend zone forever, and she's like, by the way, you got to stay here and die and kill Batman. Yeah, but he rolls a tear, and I remember being like, Jesus, like that's the power of Tom Hardy, man. Like I really overall like the performance a lot, because yeah, he does play the brute, but he plays like really interesting stuff with the limited use of his face that he has, especially his eyes.
Yeah, Dark Knight Rises was a hard one for me. I saw there was an IMAX clip that was the plane hijacking.
Yeah.
I saw that I think before Mission Impossible, and that was amazing. But I'd somehow gotten it into my head that what DC would do with the third part of the trilogy was lighten it up some and bring in the Riddler as like a non-lethal villain.
I remember hearing those rumors for like a while that the Riddler was going to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought the idea of a super rich genius who was just like, I'm going to screw with Batman, and that being his whole motivation, I think that would have been a really interesting movie.
Which they kind of tried to do with Batman vs. Superman's Lex Luthor.
Oh, jeez.
Where he's like a super rich genius, and he's got like the egg timer and everything, and he's like, oh, well, you guys get to go at it, bye. And
there are moments in that movie that are perfect, and then there's the rest of that movie.
Yeah. Well, I remember, Sam, I think for Batman v Superman, I think it was the third time. I saw that movie a lot in theaters.
Yeah, because I was at WonderCon with you, David, when in Los Angeles when that movie came out, and yeah, I didn't end up.
So I saw it, and I was trying. Like I was like that episode 1 Phantom Menace fan that saw it like 10 times. I didn't see it 10 times, but like I think I saw Batman v Superman 3 or 4 times in theaters because I was like, there has to be that moment of clarity, because it happened for me the second time I saw Man of Steel. And then I saw it a third time and it ruined it. But like the second time I saw Man of Steel, I was like, holy shit, I get it. And I'm still not saying that's a perfect movie or anything, but with Batman v Superman, I remember we were leaving the theater, and Sam and I were talking about it, and like you were saying, there's a couple moments that rule, and one of them is like a blink and you miss it moment where Doomsday's created, and Sam was talking about it, where he goes to punch Lex Luthor in the face and Superman stops it from happening. And it's like they almost accidentally did that. You know what I mean?
Not the idea that Superman would save anyone, but the idea that Superman just happened to be there.
Yeah.
In that movie.
That he would still save the guy that stole his mom, or kidnapped his mom and stuff. Like little things like that. I dug. But I remember one of the fan theories when Batman or Dark Knight Rises was happening was that the guy that tries to blackmail Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight was gonna be the Riddler. Like, that was his whole thing, was like...
That was that dude's year, because he was in The Dark Knight and Iron Man in the same year.
Oh, well.
Neither time in, like, big parts, and then nobody ever, like, he's probably dead. Like, nobody ever saw him again. But
he just turned off his podcast. He was like, oh, maybe.
It was the first Marvel DC crossover. It was just too low-key for anyone to notice.
Exactly. He's like, yo, I know who Bruce Wayne is. Now I know who Tony Stark is.
But yeah, you've been over at Viz for 6 months now, man. How things been back in the Bay and working for one of the largest, if not the largest, manga publisher in the world.
We're the biggest in the U.S., but I think technically the Japanese publishers are bigger because they're also just like regular book publishers. Mm-hmm. But it's been a full speed ahead. I've got some projects I'm working on. I've got like stuff coming up. Like, I'm finally at the point where I have projects I can't talk about, which is kind of sweet.
Sure.
It's like being inner circle almost.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny because I hate when people do that on the internet. Like, oh, like I have something teasing coming up. I'm like, who cares? Just give it to me.
I feel like
But now I get to be on the other side of that.
That's hilarious. Yeah, because I've seen there's times where I swear I scroll on Twitter for 30 seconds and every tweet is can't talk about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've done that like multiple times.
But that's got to be a badge of honor, though,
and
right?
It comes from an innocent place.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's all about being excited about what you're working on, which is great. But just like give it to me.
Yeah. From a fan standpoint, you're like, I just want to know what you're doing. But from a legal standpoint, you're like, I want to be able to do this.
Yeah. But I have a series that's going on Viz's free section on Viz.com, which is actually the first mature-rated free book that we've done. It's called Hell's Paradise, Jigoku Raku. It's by this author named Yuji Kaku. But basically, like, the short version is that it's like Blade of the Immortal plus Annihilation.
Damn.
Shit.
Yeah. But it's much more interested in being like an action comic than like a meditation on the self or occasional gore porn like Blade of the Immortal turned into.
Mm-hmm.
But the gist is that a young shinobi is put on death row because he escaped from his ninja village and was betrayed and captured, and like you get death for that apparently. But before he can be executed, he's kind of hijacked into a Dirty Dozen kind of situation where the shogun wants him and some other death row criminals to go to this island, find the elixir of life, and bring it back so he can be immortal.
Oh.
Which, fine, like, sure, that happens. They get to the island, and it's full of monsters. Like, the bugs are poisonous, there are plants growing out of people, a lot of the monsters are kind of in the shape of gods, like Buddhist and Shinto deities. So the creature design is crazy off the charts. And it couldn't be more me if, like, I chose a book to work on.
That's awesome.
It's just a bunch of things that, like, I love all wrapped up in one package, like creepy body horror, ninja stuff that has, like, superpower type ninja stuff. It's a very important subcategory.
Yeah.
And then, like, straight up, there's a bunch of samurai in it, too, so it's win-win.
Yeah, it almost kind of sounds like 47 Ronin, but good.
Yeah.
I wanted that movie to be
wasn't as bad as I expected, but it was also not as good as I expected. I wanted it to be, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being super stoked because I did that thing when I used to work at a Blockbuster. I would just pick an actor and watch their entire filmography because I was like running out of movies to rent. And I remember I had done I was in the middle of the Keanu-thon.
Did you get to Hardball?
Oh, I own Hardball, yeah. And the only actor I've visited multiple times is Keanu Reeves because, like, I love, like, there's something about him, and I think being a nice guy goes a long way.
He's also so
Absolutely.
earnest.
Yes. Well, again, I remember being like, seems like the nicest dude in a sea of, like, phony fucks. You know what I mean? Like, like he just, and then, like, I was so happy when John Wick fucking ruled, and it kind of brought him back. Because I remember when that trailer dropped, I was thinking, like, oh, it'll be another kind of, like, weird
Action movie
that doesn't go anywhere for Keanu. And because he did a bunch of weird shit. I can't remember. There's one movie he did, Henry's Crime. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. It's a weird fucking movie, man. Like, I can't even explain it. But, like, he was just on this, like, roll of weird shit. But I remember 47 Ronin came out, and I just couldn't bring myself to see it. Like, I really wanted to. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Hiroyuki Sanada.
I don't know.
The cast was amazing. The trouble is, like, the story of the original 47 Ronin is great.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't need all that fake Lord of the Rings stuff put into it.
Yeah, that was the thing that kind of threw me off, like, all the CG ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't need all that shit.
Because I think 13 Assassins had come out not too long before 47 Ronin was announced. Did you two see that?
I did not know.
No.
I think it's on Netflix.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's must-watching. It's
Okay,
It was my introduction to my favorite Miike movie. But it's, like, just all swordplay and skullduggery. And revenge. Yeah. Like, at one point, someone unrolls a scroll that just says Total Massacre, and it's the start of a fight scene.
I got Netflix ready right there, Jim.
I think I have it on I swear to God, I think I have it on my watch list for years. But, like, that's cool, man. Yeah,
it's the real deal. And so I think that kind of, it showed me what 47 Ronin could have been. And 47 Ronin didn't have a 45-minute fight scene, so it lost out.
Shit.
Oh, God.
Did you see the Blade of the Immortal movie that came out recently?
Yeah, I liked it.
Did you? Okay, because I think it's on Amazon Prime or something.
It's on Prime streaming. It's on Netflix as well. It was as good as it could have been.
Cool.
Considering what they were trying to do.
Okay. That's all.
But they really nailed the colors, which was very interesting.
Right on.
That's something, as I've become more of a snob as I've gotten older, which I feel like we all do.
Yeah.
You're Eisner nominated now, so you're the Eisner nominated snob.
Snob, yeah. I was always kind of, like, surprised, speaking of Eisner nominations, that we never, like, that Image Plus in the 2-year tenure, that it never got the nod. Like, it doesn't keep me up at night.
My guess is the board saw it as marketing material more than, like, creative material.
Mm.
But I would have put us up against any other publication in comics, personally.
Oh yeah, I mean, what were they thinking it was? Were they hoping for, like, Wizard Magazine 2.0?
Yeah.
No, it was
I think it's telling that Marvel, DC, and IDW announced magazines not too long after Image Plus started coming out.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun to be there for those early years. Maybe one of these days they'll have me back.
Oh man.
Well, no, I have to bring it up, David, because every time we've ever had a conversation, we always mention Frank Castle, and I think since I've talked to you last, I finally finished. I don't think we talked about this last time. I finally finished all of Punisher Max. Like I finally read
and
the
Platoon. You had just finished Platoon.
Oh,
as well.
Platoon is fucking
Platoon
amazing.
was devastating.
Oh my god, like that's another one talking about like sucking the air out of your chest moment. Like the last page gave me goosebumps of spoilers for Platoon. And you read it, David?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to. Okay, like, and I talked to Sam about it already. So spoilers for Platoon 3, 2, 1. The last page where his buddies are talking about like, this is the last time they ever saw Frank, and they're in the Huey and they wave, and the guy's like, I knew he wasn't gonna wave back, and you turn the page and it's a full page of Tiny Frank waving at the helicopter, and it's like, oh my god, it's devastating. Like that whole series is amazing.
Like in Parlov especially, like together separately they're very good, but together it's just like alchemy. It's like Frank Miller and Klaus Janson or something.
Yeah.
Or even, I would say like Miller and Mazzucchelli.
Mm.
Yeah.
Parlov is a freaking beast, man. Like that guy just gets Frank. Like it's weird because like before I was really diving into the Max stuff, especially where like he kind of like cut his teeth with Frank, like. The idea of Frank being this like muscle-bound guy, I was like, that makes no sense. But like the way he would draw him, like I got it. Like the big forearms, like
tank.
almost the tiny head, and like just like that. I can't remember all the names for the different books, but like there's that one where it's like basically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre arc, where he like goes and he has that guy in his trunk, and like he goes and he stops like a bunch of teenagers from getting killed by a bunch of like hillbillies or whatever, and he's drawn like a fucking brick house, man. Like he's huge. And that was where I was like, finally, was like, Parlov is like my favorite Punisher artist, like by far. Like that might be obvious, but like he is. I just love the way he draws action. I read the Frank Kills the Marvel Universe, but like it was the zombie one. Like, 'cause like I think there's two different ones.
Oh yeah, Jonathan Mayberry wrote that one.
Yeah, and like at the end he has like long hair, and he's got they carve the skull into his chest as a joke, and he's like just freaking rocking guys left and right. Like, yep. And I think Parlov just stepped his game up big time with Platoon. Like, because he's so good at action, but like the close-up of like the first time you see like Lieutenant Frank Castle, he's like this like almost like innocent, good-looking guy, like, and of course we know where that goes. But I finally finished the Jason Aaron, Steve Dillon run that ends it.
Oh yeah, that was 13 issues, right? Something like that.
It was long. I don't remember how long it was, but I remember we were driving back. We were visiting my brother in New York. And my dad was driving, and I read the entire thing in like 4 or 5 hours, or however long it was. But it was long. It was definitely like it might have been, I don't even remember now. But that stuff blew my mind. Like little things like Frank talks about not being able to how to remember what his wife sounded like. Like he couldn't know her voice. I remember I sent Sam that clip. I was like a psychopath just sending Sam random panels. Like, holy shit, man! Like, it's the little things of Frank Castle that blows me away. It's not like him blowing up a building with bad guys in it. It's like the little thing where he admits to like his old medic that he doesn't remember what his wife's voice sounds like. Like shit like that is so dark. And then like right after that, I think I had or sent you a tweet or something. Like I immediately read Fury, and that is, man, there is nothing fun in that book, but it is that book is amazing, like absolutely amazing. Like
I love reading about the Vietnam War because like as a kid, my grandfather served, so as a kid it was always very interesting to me. And seeing such a well done book in that era, I guess partially in that era, coming from Marvel Comics of all places, it's like sensitive, it's good, and it's still exciting.
I mean, it's just so like, and that's another thing with Ennis too. Like he's so in his element in that Max stuff. Because what I tried to do afterwards, and I'll finish it one day, so maybe my opinion will change. But after I finished Fury Max, I started reading the Peacemaker book, which is Marvel Knights, not the Max imprint. And when you kind of neuter Ennis like that, like a lot of it's law. When you don't let him go nuts. And Peacemaker, it's two-eyed Nick Fury in World War II, and it's fine. And it's who's the artist for Bourne? I can't remember his name.
Derek Robertson.
Yeah, he does the art too, and the art's fantastic. But there's just something like when you don't let Ennis go full tilt with Fury and Frank. There's just a little bit lost there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It was a mistake on my part to kind of like jump right into it after reading Fury, because Fury doesn't pull any punches. I mean, there's some of the most violent stuff I've ever seen. You know, even rivaling the Punisher stuff in that 12 issues or whatever it was for Fury Max.
Yeah, he does a good job of keeping it from being. Some comics are violent, and that's the draw. Fury Max is violent, but it's like part of a bigger lesson about how bad America has screwed up the entire world.
But also the idea of like, you go into that book and like when you first meet Nick Fury, like in his heyday, he's this like handsome big guy. He what is my favorite line? I'll have to try to remember, look it up later. But he yells at a guy and calls him some fucking ridiculous vulgar name, and I thought it was hilarious. But he's like James Bond with an eye patch. He's like the coolest guy. And then
that was how he was originally kind of conceived.
Yeah,
too.
but then
repurposed.
The thing that Ennis does is then it cuts to the scene of him almost in this like vegetative, like old man state, locked up in a hotel in a robe, and he's just a fucking mess.
Like he's wearing his sins.
Oh my god! And like someone knocks on the door to be like, "Hey, like, are you still alive?" Because it's been like 2 weeks, and he's like got the he's got the 45 in his like backhand. He's super like nuts, and like, oh man, like yeah. And seeing all those like the main characters, there's like the 4 or 5 characters you follow throughout that series age. Because it goes to like basically the 50s to like the 2000s. Like you basically cover like half a century in those 12 issues, and it like works. Like it moves great. So, yeah, I just have to
highly right. Like it's honestly between Fury Max, Punisher Max, and Platoon. Like that's 3 out of Marvel's top 5 stories ever sorted for me.
Oh, and it's crazy too, because like as much as I've grown up reading like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man stuff, like I feel like in the past like 2 years, like I've read more Frank Castle than like any other hero or Marvel character or just comic character in general. Like it's insane. And yeah, I can't recommend that the Punisher Max stuff enough. And I think reading the Fury Max right after is a great chaser, because how the Punisher Max series ends with Nick Fury. Yeah, it's solid. It's so good. So I had to just touch base with you, because that's kind of been
the Punisher update.
That's right. So I have not kept up with the recent like War Machine Punisher stuff. I have the first
run.
I read the first issue, but I have the trade, so I'm a little behind on my Frank Castle. But I had to take a break because it was getting dark there for a little bit, man. Like reading all that stuff, There
was a period where Jake was just wearing like Skull T-shirts all the time.
Oh
talking
yeah.
about like kids that he apparently has that he doesn't have anymore.
Yeah. Oh, also,
I believe it.
Real quick, the line in Fury Max, because I love it so much, is some guys like hitting on the woman that Frank kind of like,
or that Nick.
Or Nick, yeah, that Nick's kind of with throughout the series, and he says, "Back the fuck off, ballsack." And that was when I knew. That was another moment I sent it to Sam. I'm like, dude, this is the greatest story I've ever read. I wish I could throw that line out like at a bar sometime and actually, sound like a badass. But no, that was great.
I have faith in you. Unless you get beaten up, in which case I suggest you not do that.
That's right. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it to Nick Fury.
Yeah. We just had Tyler Shanline on the show yesterday. I guess that comes out next week to promote the beef. And I asked him his super secret Image Comics origin. So here I am asking you your super secret Image Comics origin.
For working there or for reading the books?
Either. Yeah, either.
Working there is super boring, so I'll just do reading the books. Because it was like, I stopped liking my old job, and I got a new job, and then I was working at Image Comics.
Nice.
But so as a kid, I always say like my uncle discovered girls in high school, and I got all of his comics. Mm-hmm. So I grew up on like Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, and Jim Lee. Like Jim Lee, X-Men #1, one of my favorite comics ever. Rob Liefeld's like first 6 or 7 issues of X-Force, like loved those as a kid. I was the guy who was disappointed when Mike Mignola did a fill-in issue, because, like, who is this guy? I've since come around on, Mike Mignola, but, like, Liefeld was the draw in 1992. And McFarlane on Spider-Man is still, like, it took years for anyone else to be, like, an acceptable Spider-Man artist for me.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically him and Mark Bagley, and like a very, very few others. So I couldn't afford a lot of comics, but when I heard about Image, I would do whatever I could to trade for Image books. And I think I bought a copy of Spawn #1 and then some random Wildcats. Because like McFarlane was my most favorite at that point in time. Now Jim Lee's probably my most favorite of that crew. So I never had like consecutive issues of Image comics because I couldn't get to the shop to get it. Like my mom wasn't having that. I had to buy like novel books, like with words in them and whatnot. But there was something about those books where they were just edgy enough to be perfect for. Like I was born in '83, so I would have been like 9 or 10 when I first started reading Image books. Yeah. Spawn had like cursing and blood and like weird devil stuff that didn't quite make sense. The Wildcats were just incredibly violent and super hot. They were like just like a weird knockoff X-Men, but in a really good way.
To be fair, so is Cyberforce.
Yeah, there's a lot of knockoff X-Men in the Image universe. But the comics, like you could feel the energy coming off of it. And like I went to a point where I was like, all right, well, like Liefeld's art sucks now, so I'm not reading this anymore. McFarlane's not good at writing, so whatever. And Jim Lee doesn't draw comics anymore, so that's done too. But I've come back around to where I finally understand what I liked about those comics back then, and like I appreciate those artists in a different way than I did before. Probably even more than I did as a kid, to be honest, because it's much more like fuller featured. I think. I think Jim Lee is like. People talk about Jack Kirby as originating like superhero language, like that kind of storytelling. Yeah. I think Jim Lee is the number 2 guy in terms of being like significant superhero artists.
Well, my favorite Miller thing Miller. He has to deal with the story, but my favorite Jim Lee story was he was talking on one of the
All-Star Batman and Robin.
Dude, I love All-Star Batman and Robin, man.
Yeah, same here. I was just reminiscing about that on the internet.
I fucking love that book. Oh my god, like Corey, our friend Corey, like she when I was working in the comic shop, she was like, "You like crazy shit." She's like, "I love this book. Check it out." And like, I'm a Miller, freak, so I was like, I don't know, because you Google that book and everyone's like, "Fuck it."
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, I love this. Like, what a ballsy take on Batman, man. Like, no one has like tried that since. Because, people were like, it's stupid, but I think it's so great. Anyway, but the thing I loved about Jim Lee, like, it was one of the Kevin Smith, I think, podcasts he was on, maybe the Fat Man on Batman or something, where he talked about, like, when he was first starting out and he would draw until his hands cramped and his, like, blisters on his hands, is he would run laps when he wasn't drawing. And what he would do to psych himself up to run more is he would yell out, like a psychopath, he would yell, "Miller, burn! Miller, burn!" And I was like, dude, I love this guy even more, because like those are 2 of my favorite like artists of all time too. Like the idea of this like young Jim Lee, like having no idea that this dude's gonna like basically turn comics on its ear, running around a track yelling "Miller, burn" is like the
That's
greatest
amazing.
Rocky thing ever. Yeah, I wish I could remember the exact interview so I could point it to. It's probably one of the Kevin Smith ones, but it's great just hearing about how he would just draw and draw and draw and draw until his hands cramped and blisters and stuff like that, and then he would run just to keep his mind going, and how much of a
Do you know about the Frank Miller Jim Lee beef from the '90s?
I remember hearing something about that. I can't remember what book it was, but I remember didn't like Miller like say he ripped him off or something or stole?
Yeah. Basically, the Sin City letter columns from the '90s are a work of art because it's like unfiltered, and it's before Miller went full Miller, so like there's a lot that you agree with.
Yeah.
Like his Creator Rights stuff is great. He talks about Marvel stealing Electro from him all the time, but he also talks about Tim Sale and Jim Lee because when they did Death Blow, they did it in a style that was that same stark black and white as Sin City, and Miller was like, "What are you dudes doing? This is mine." And
I invented black and white.
Yeah. They were like, these kids are, just on my jock all the time. And I wonder, I mean, obviously the answer is probably money, but like them getting together for All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, like the 2 split loves of my childhood.
Yeah.
That felt so good, man.
Well, it's nice to know that happened after the beef. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah.
I remember, I think it was in the same interview, Jim Lee says like every so often him and Frank will email each other and be like, dude, let's finish All-Star. Because, like, it never finished. And, like, those guys are big enough where, like, they could be like, no, we're finishing it, fuck everybody else, So that, I remember hearing about the beef between the two of them, but yeah, it does my heart good to know that like they're buddies.
Well, if you remember, Jake, when we were at the Eisners, Jim Lee accepted the Hall of Fame award on Frank's behalf.
That's
at
right.
that time, Frank's health was
Frank was super sick.
Yeah, that's cool.
On the down. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Jim Lee came up and did that, and then I met Frank at the New York Comic Con, which was like the coolest thing ever. But yeah, that's cool. That's I hope one day they finish All-Star Batman and Robin, because that book is so freaking insane.
They even announced the name of the finale, like they were going to do like a final miniseries or 4 issues or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to call it Dark Knight Boy Wonder.
Oh.
And I'm just like, please give this to me.
One of the things about that book too that like people always point to, because when I work at the comic shop, like I swear I wasn't trolling people when I did this, but when I had like staff picks, I'd put up like Dark Knight Strikes Again or like All-Star Batman and Robin, because I wanted people to come up and be like, why the fuck is this on here? And I'd be like, well, let me tell you about it. And then maybe you hate it, like, because I have no problem if you read the book and you hate it. That's fine, I don't care. But the people would come up and be like, this book sucks. And I'm like, well, have you read it? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, check it out. Like, granted, I know the art style in Dark Knight Strikes Again is hard to look at, but I for some reason love it. I was telling Sam, like, the Xerxes book that's going on right now or whatever. Like, everything in my brain is telling me that art style is terrible. But
just like squares.
But I just love. I don't know what it is. Like, it's not even biased towards Frank Miller. It's just I don't know what it is. I just love how ridiculous it is. But there's a lot of heart in All-Star Batman and Robin. Like, there's moments like when Bruce takes Dick Grayson to the grave of his parents to let him mourn at the end.
That was issue 8 or 9, I think.
Yeah, I think it might be the last page of the series, like, or one of the last pages.
There was one after that, because that was the issue where Batgirl was cussing and they censored it.
That's right.
Poorly.
Yeah. But, and like how kind of Frank inadvertently created his own Batman universe, which I love. Like, I love reading that as one guy,
Yeah, same here. I mean, really, I agree with you on the Frank Miller Batman universe idea, because All-Star Batman is the story of why Batman needs Robin.
Yeah.
Because over the course of the series, like, he's kind of a prick.
Oh yeah.
And he's exactly who someone who succeeded to the level that he did in Batman Year One would be. And now he's like, oh wait, I can't just be a monster. I can't just be this Clint Eastwood tough guy.
Yeah.
I need something to balance me out. Like, fear is not enough.
It's almost like if Batman was responding to how big-headed Frank Miller could have gotten from the praise of Year One. You know what I mean?
Oh,
it's
man.
like
yeah.
It's like if Batman knew Year One existed and how great it was received and how it's considered. Like, some people and I have no problem with this whatsoever. Some people are like, they'll take that over Dark Knight Returns. And it's like, yeah, if Batman existed, he'd be like, fuck yeah, I was in Year One, man. Like, I'm a badass. And he just goes around being a huge dick to everybody. And yeah, like, Robin's like, dude, don't make me eat rats in the Batcave, man. Like, this is terrible.
Can I please have a cheeseburger?
Yeah. But, I don't know if we talked about it last time we were on, because again, everything feels like forever ago.
It's the state of affairs these days.
But like the Dark Knight Master Race book, like, I recently, I read it, every issue that came out or whatever, I picked it up, but it was like over like a year and a half or however long it was. Yeah. And so like I would miss things in between. And so, when the trade came out, I just read it in one, like, not one sitting, but I read it within a couple hours, And I think it's a solid book. I think, I don't know how much of it is Miller and Azzarello. I don't know how much DC might have been like, hey, maybe, we'll put Miller's name on it, and I don't know. But I thought it was, what I like to think is it was Frank Miller's redemption of Superman in that book, because I'm probably the only person on the planet who's excited for the Superman Year One, because Miller is all over the place, and John Romita Jr.'s art is all over the place. But again, I just have a thing for blocky art, I guess. Giant hands on small wrists. So and I love Superman, and I love origin stories, like everything that's going on, whatever. But like, I loved it. Did you read the Master Race, David?
No, I skipped it. I like my Miller unfiltered.
Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of bummed me out. I wish they would have let him just go, because again, I like Azzarello, but I don't know how much is him and how much is Azzarello, whatever. But I don't want to spoil it for, if you ever read it, but I think there's a lot of really great Superman stuff in it. And like when you start reading it, you'll be like, what is he talking about? But like towards the end, there's some really cool shit that I think, because I read Dark Knight Returns, All-Star Batman and Robin, he pretty much shits in Superman. That's fine. That's funny. Where like he's like running across the ocean and he's like,
she doesn't dunk on him as hard as he does Green Lantern.
Oh yeah, if I remember
Green Lantern, he had it coming. That was too good. Like he retroactively had it coming.
One of our really good friends we were hanging out with at the time, we were talking about the book. He's like the biggest Green Lantern fan. I'm like, dude, never read All-Star Batman and Robin. All-Star Batman and Robin, dude. I don't look at like the Dark Knight Returns, for example, as anti-Superman. I mean, like, yeah, there's stuff where it's like, okay, he's like, Reagan's stooge or whatever, but it's like my favorite moment of the Dark Knight Returns, and they did it so well in the excellent adaptation with Peter Weller and Mark Valley as Superman, is the wink at the funeral. Like, I think that is Miller understanding Superman better than anybody else. And also too, the other thing too is when I probably talked about this last time with you, but like the when Batman and him are having their big fight and he has the heart attack, and like all Batman's done the entire time that we've read this book is shit on Clark Kent and Superman. Like, you're a fucking like stooge. You've turned, you've betrayed.
Soft, Clark.
Yeah, you've gone soft. You betrayed everything.
He's like, come on, man, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, exactly. You betrayed everything about America and superheroes and our friendship, and fuck you. And the one thing Superman does is when Bruce is dead, like he believes Bruce is dead, and the one soldier goes to touch him, and he still is like, don't fucking touch him. Like, Superman still like is protecting Bruce Wayne. And that's something I think that's so, and that took me a while to like really get, like when whenever I'd read it, like every couple of years or whatever. Because I remember the first time I read The Dark Knight Returns, I was like, oh, Superman sucks. Like, I was like, oh, he does. Like, okay, cool, Batman forever. And I still, of course I love Batman, but like, I read it and thinking like, oh yeah, Superman's just like an asshole, like Boy Scout, like fuck him.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, maybe it's just me like trying to project like a positive Superman thing on it. But then also the wink at the end. I mean, that's Frank Miller, growing up on Kurt Swan and all that kind of stuff. Being like, there's the wink. And
I think it says a lot about Miller's approach to, and both how he views Superman as like a fan. Mm-hmm. Because fundamentally, like, Superman's not any less powerful in Dark Knight than he was elsewhere. He just had bad leadership.
Yeah.
Like, Superman is always going to be the guy who is an agent of the establishment to an extent. Like, he's the kind protector that you want the government to be, while Batman is the outlaw. And in Dark Knight Returns, he is still the protector that is needed, but the person directing the protection is not great.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, Batman never doubts Superman in any of Miller's stuff. Mm-hmm. Even when he's poking fun in All-Star Batman, making him run across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Which was great. Like, it's still because he knows what Superman is. He's like, this idiot doesn't even know that he can fly.
Yeah,
and he takes him very seriously.
Yeah.
But he still screws with him a lot.
But I also love the tiny, tiny breadcrumbs of friendship. Like,
yeah,
I don't like when they lay it on thick. Like, hey, we're best friends, Batman, Superman.
It's a Goku Vegeta thing.
I love it. I love the tiny
totally
moments. Yeah, any of those tiny moments where like it's just a handshake, or what was it? I think it was, I can't remember what issue it is now, but there was something I read recently, some Batman Superman thing, where again it was just like a tiny little nod, and that's enough for Clark. That's enough for Bruce. I guess that's the equivalent of a hug from Bruce Wayne. There's
that moment in Hush where he's just like, "What are friends for?"
Yeah.
Like handshakes him.
Yeah.
After kicking the shit out of him across Metropolis and throwing his wife off a building, just like,
yeah.
What are friends for?
Yeah, that's so good. Well, like John Byrne's Man of Steel, where he has Batman and Superman meet for the first time, and Superman flies to Gotham, and are they going against like Silver Banshee or whatever, or somebody?
It's Magpie.
Magpie, you're right. That's right. I was thinking of a totally different thing. And
Public Enemies is where they take on Silver Banshee.
And Batman's like, I have a bomb strapped to to an innocent in Gotham, and if you fuck with me, I'll blow it up. And Superman's like, Jesus! Like, I just came from Metropolis, and everyone loves me. Like, dude, I heard you were dark, but goddamn, man. And so then he's like, well, help me take down Magpie. And he's like, all right, cool. And then at the end, he's like, by the way, the bomb was on me the whole time. And Superman's like, all right, man. I'm keeping my eye on you, but what the fuck? Like, he like just floats away like, all right, buddy.
I think my favorite Batman Superman moment, outside of Miller stuff, because that'll always be close to my heart, would be in Justice League Rock of Ages by Grant Morrison and Howard Porter.
Oh, yeah.
There's a point where Superman is possessed, what is it? Not Magnog, Mangog, some kind of super ultra-dimensional apocalyptic event.
Yeah.
So he's under mind control, and do you remember the name?
Was that the one? That wasn't where, like, Darkseid shows up, is it? Where, like, Darkseid wins? Yeah. Was it, it wasn't Metron, was it?
No.
It wasn't, was it not a new god?
It was a device. Actually, I'd have to look it up. Anyway, he's possessed, everything's going wrong, and Martian Manhunter is on, like, the telepathic phone to him being like, Superman, like, it's gonna be okay, like, please just hold steady. And then Batman's like, let me talk to him, and he pulls off his mask, and he's basically like, Clark, we're the Justice League, we don't do despair. And Superman just goes, I hate when you use the voice, and turns it around.
That's great.
That is just so, like, the friendship, the respect, the camaraderie is so good in that moment.
Well, you made me remember of a moment, and it's awful because I can't remember the issue that it's from, but it was like a collection of Batman Superman stories when I was at the comic shop, and I'd always, like, anytime, because that would happen a lot where people come in like, who's been Batman or Superman, blah blah blah, and I'd always love to flip to this moment, and it's a Christmas issue, and Superman of course has a present for Batman. And he has a pocket in his cape, and he pulls out The Mark of Zorro on VHS, and he goes, I just figured you would like this. And he gives it to, Batman. And, of course, Clark has no idea that's the last movie he saw as a happy person. That's the last movie he saw, depending on which, the origin you're going with. But, with Miller and most people, it's the last thing he saw was the Mark of Zorro, and then his parents are killed. And it's such a nice moment where, like, Superman just is like, oh, I figured you'd like Zorro, and gives him this VHS, and Batman plays it, like, super, like, it's a really wonderful, odd moment. Where he's like leaning on the Batmobile, and he takes the VHS, and he's like, "Oh yeah." He goes, "Have you seen it?" And I don't remember if Batman's response is like if he lies or if he tells the truth. But he like it's one of the few moments where Batman doesn't really have something to say, and it's like just a nice little moment where like, of course, the good guy Superman, I'm gonna buy you a present, and has no idea the effect that it has on Bruce Wayne.
Like it's an incredibly thoughtful present too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he has no idea,
Yeah, that's part of the fun of all these long-running superhero comics is even when they're bad, there's something in there where we're like, it's nostalgia plus like the weight of history butting up against each other. Because for us, like Batman and Superman have been best friends for 60 years or whatever. So there are all these stories where writers are trying to like demonstrate that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you hit on the one where you're like, oh, this is it. Like this is the one for me.
Yeah.
This is my moment.
And I'm still waiting for that in live action. Like, not to shit on, like, everyone shits on the DC movies, and like, Batman.
They make it so easy.
I know, but like, I remember when it was the last I think it was the last San Diego, and I think actually, David, you were with us. We were walking around going to get something to eat, and they had just released. No, this might have been 2 years ago. I can't remember, but they had the it was the Justice League trailer that just dropped.
Yeah, because we were walking around and then we ended up playing chess at that hotel. Was it the Hilton, like their lobby or whatever, their bar?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like the Justice League trailer just dropped, and of course it's funny because like everyone's like, oh, you're at Comic-Con, you get to see all these trailers come out. I'm like, actually, you guys probably get to see them before I do, because by the time my Wi-Fi works, it's like the next day, or it's like 2 hours to watch a 2-minute trailer. And I remember the trailer for Justice League, it had that speech that Bruce Wayne gives about Superman, like what he means to the world. And I remember talking to Sam about it, and I was like, it was a great speech, but none of that has been shown in any of the movies so far. You know what I mean? Like,
spent an entire movie like plotting to kill him, and then you vindictively slashed his face with a kryptonite spear.
The man who would be king. And then he's like, and then all of Justice League, he's like, I failed him. And they're like, well, he's gonna come back and kill you. And it's like, no, they made up. Like the last thing, Superman's last thought is not fuck Batman. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like this big bone monster.
Yeah. Oh my god, I'm being stabbed through the chest.
I would love it if that was his first thought on waking up.
That would have saved Justice League.
Oh man.
But yeah, David, something as you may recall that we ask everybody that comes on our fine program. What are you currently geeking out over?
Oh, I forgot about this question, but I've got a really easy answer. There's an anime called Megalobox that the finale comes out today. I'm going to watch it tomorrow at work with friends because we got a small posse.
Nice.
But so it is the 50th anniversary of the Japanese manga Ashita no Joe, which translates to Tomorrow's Joe, which is about a kid from the slums who grows up to be an amazing boxer and eventually dies in the ring. Like his death is one of the most it's like I Am Your Father from Star Wars in terms of like cultural impact. And once you see it, if you've watched anime, you'll go like, oh, like I get a lot more jokes now. But so Megalobox is the 50th. It's a celebration for the 50th. They made an entirely new series. It's 12 or 13 episodes long, one of the two. And then instead of just doing like Ashita no Joe 2, they took the entire story, broke it down, and recreated those same ideas in a new setting. So now it's kind of in a post-apocalypse, like dusty wasteland. Boxers wear these things called gear that are basically robot arms, like Cable or something like that from X-Men. And then they just box. Everything else is just extremely normal boxing. And it stars a guy named Junk Dog who, once he finally gets into the big tournament that's building up, they call him Gearless Joe because he's the only guy who doesn't use gear.
Nice.
And it's amazing. It is just extremely, there's this idea of like a man's romance where it's like adventure, friendship, camaraderie, all these things, like Indiana Jones, One Piece type stuff. And this series is full of that. And just there've been good plot twists, there've been amazing fights. In one episode, a character like recaps the story as a rap song out of nowhere. Like my jaw dropped and I was just like, I want to cry right now. This is so beautiful.
That's awesome.
I love it. I can't get enough. I can't wait for the finale. I've been listening to the soundtrack all day. It's just one of those series where like it was perfectly pitched and I was right in the whatever baseball term translates to like target audience.
That's awesome.
Pocket? Right in the glove, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Sweet spot.
Yeah.
No, something I wanted to bring up to you real quick, because I'm geeking out about it hard right now, and you had mentioned it on an Instagram post I had posted. I don't expect you to remember everything, but I'm reading that On a Pale Horse book.
The Incarnations of Immortality.
Yeah. Did you say that you had read all the other books?
If not all of them, a lot of them. It was back in middle school, so it's been like quite some time.
Well, I remember you had posted it, and you were like, "Yeah, I read this in middle school." I'm like, "Oh man, I'm a 31-year-old just figuring out this book for the first time." Because like I like have this like it's not morbid, but it is morbid. I have this weird fascination with the personification of death. Because I think it's really fascinating to like see artists or authors' interpretations of like I just read the High Cost of Living last night, the Neil Gaiman series on death.
Death of Captain Marvel.
The Death of Captain Marvel is like legit my favorite Marvel book, and it's not even just because of the personification of death. I think that is just like a stunning.
There's a reason why they never resurrected.
Marvel, but I mean it's just that's a whole other podcast in itself. I mean that's stunning. That's a tearjerker book for sure. But like, no, I was just wondering if you had any other things about like the rest of the books, because like I'm about maybe halfway through On a Pale Horse, which if people don't know what that's about, it's a horrible synopsis that I'll give, but it's like the Santa Claus but death. Because it's not funny, like, but like it's true, like
there's the Santa Claus.
Yeah, but it's like what happens if you kill death? You become death, and like I sound like Kevin Smith when I say this, but there's passages in that book where it's like it makes me like okay with the idea of death sometimes. Like it's so weird, but like there's an interaction that Zane, this guy who becomes the new death, the second person he has to take their soul, is this old elderly man in a hospital, and this old man basically calms Death about his new job while he's dying. And it's like one of the craziest interactions. Like, this old man is like basically telling Death it's going to be okay and promise me you'll always, don't let anyone suffer. But like, just how clever that book is with Death and like, purgatory and using computers and souls and, what it means to be Death. Because so much of it comes from, the Grim Reaper skull and scythe and robes. But it's just a really cool take. So yeah, I'm excited that it's a series of like 7 or 8 books. I'm definitely looking forward to checking out the rest of them. So anyway, Dave, I didn't know if you had any recollections or memories of reading those books.
Yeah, it was one of those ones. The way that Zane becomes Death, I think, was what captured me as a kid. Because basically, I got a library card and a bicycle, and then it was over. Like, I was a reader from that point out.
That's awesome.
And I read the part where he goes to kill himself, and Death is there, and he shoots Death by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, by the way, this is your job now.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a good, like, hook. All the books are, from what I remember, it's been, like, quite some time.
Sure.
Not quite some time. I'm not that old, but, each book is a little bit different genre-wise.
Okay.
So they're very diverse reads. Like, some are, like, all about war, all about love. They'll have really good titles, as well.
They do. Like,
but mostly...
Yeah.
Like, if you're a mythology buff, which I also got into as a kid, it was one of the first ways I looked at mythology in a way that wasn't just reading, like, encyclopedia summaries. Zeus was the god of blah, blah, blah. So-and-so was born from his forehead.
Mm-hmm.
This was, like, gods are messy and people, and also kind of like a vocation. Like, you got to take this seriously.
Yeah. It's, I remember just looking at, because I'm doing it through Audible, so I'm, like, listening to it. And the cover was just striking because it's just Death looking exhausted in like a sports car, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, and the idea that like he pushes a button and the car becomes a horse or it becomes a boat, whatever he needs, and like, his, and the fact that Death isn't immortal, like, well, the Death is immortal but can be killed, so like fate, keeps showing up as fate does. And keeps telling him, like, hey, man, like, until you get killed on the job, like, this is your job. And, like, also it's a performance review. Like, if you suck at it, you're going to hell. Like, it's really cool. Like, I'm surprised that it has a, in nowadays with, the, things being adapted and comic books. And I saw that it got adapted to a comic book, and the art was actually really stunning. Like, the... Oh,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you just Google, like, On a Pale Horse comic or whatever... and especially, you being kind of transfixed by the scene where he becomes Death, it's kind of really cool. Like, it's just like kind of like painted art. I don't remember the artist's name, which is terrible, but it's kind of interesting. They did a comic adaptation of On a Pale Horse. I don't know if they did any of the other books. But
didn't he also could Death stop time?
Yeah, Death has a watch.
Right, yeah, because I was also into Dick Tracy as a kid.
Oh, yeah, well, Dick Tracy's the greatest. Like, I just saw that they were releasing a wrist radio, like, for real wrist radio.
Oh, man.
That's not an iWatch?
No. Like, I have the Apple Watch solely because of Dick Tracy. Like, I dropped that money because I wanted to be Dick Tracy. But they're legit making a, like, basically replica watch that is an LED-looking wrist radio. And they're only making a certain amount. And I was like, do I drop even more money to own this Dick Tracy wrist radio? Because it looks like straight out of the comic books.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the idea that he could stop time. And it's great because he stops time and then time shows up. And he's like, what's up? But that's cool, though. Yeah, I'll have to continue with it. Like, I'm horrible with finishing books without, comic pages in them. I'm really enjoying it, and I think it's just it's an interesting take because the writer was Piers Anthony, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. It's funny because he's kind of he's like in his like early 80s now, and I think he was like talking about how like he's kind of leaning towards atheist, but he comes up with these like brilliant things about like death and like talking about the end of life and what the afterlife means, and it's funny how someone like that can think so much about it and come up with these kind of amazing ideas of what it means to be death. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm really
I think it's
it.
sort of like how Garth Ennis doesn't like superheroes, but he writes a really good Superman.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So, David, just before we sign off, when does that book that you were describing as Annihilation meets
Hell's Paradise.
Hell's Paradise, yeah. When does that come up on the Viz site?
It comes out Mondays and Thursdays usually. For the next couple of weeks, just Monday, because we're traveling for conventions and there's a lot going on. But yeah, it's called Hell's Paradise Jikoku Raku. HELL''S. It's kind of a pun in the title. Yeah, every week, completely free as long as you make an account on the website. But aside from that, my first print book comes out in November. I'm working on Dragon Quest illustrations and Akira Toriyama art book, which is amazing. Yeah, right? Like 500 different drawings from his Dragon Quest design days. It's so cool seeing his evolution over time. Record of Grand Crest War, which I think comes out in December. That's by the guy who did Record of Lodoss War in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. It's like his next medieval fantasy king-making manga. And the other November book is We Never Learned Volume 1, which is like a teenage harem comedy about a guy who has to study two very intelligent, like one is very talented in English but terrible at STEM, and the other is really great at STEM but terrible in English. But they want to go to colleges for the subjects they're terrible in, so he has to tutor them so that he can get a scholarship and get them into school, and then also support his extremely poor family.
It sounds almost like Tenchi-esque.
Very much so. I mean, it is very funny to me that my first series are like video games I wanted to play as a kid, a like harem comedy, which was also all that was around when I was a kid, and then like a Record of Lodoss War related property, which is one of the first anime I ever saw. Well, like, life is good.
And not just a video game like rendered by Toriyama.
Yeah.
Like
I feel really good.
It's one of those, like, we were talking the last time you were on, it was just like, look, this jump wasn't planned, but it kind of turned out to be like the best career move, most genius career move ever.
Oh, also, I get to edit JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
What the hell?
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh man, what? Since the last time you've been on, Super has ended. What did you think?
Oh yeah, I actually caught up on the anime. Just like I've been reading the manga because I personally I prefer shonen manga to shonen anime. There's like pacing I enjoy better when I get to do it. But so I watched like the last 20 or 30 episodes of the series, and it delivered on the hype. I was amazed. Android 18 fighting the people from like the Beautiful Romance universe. That fight was super good because it's all about the power of love. So like it's her and Krillin's time to shine, but she's not that affectionate.
Yeah.
And just that last fight, like
everybody
Vegeta and Goku teaming up. Yeah. I thought that I was beyond like the hero and the villain, like with the mutual cause kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then they did it, and I totally understood why an entire crowd of people in the middle of Mexico City were chanting Vegeta's name when they were broadcasting the finale on the side of a building.
Yeah.
Like, it was that hype.
Like, I wish we got, like, in the States that, like, bonkers over... we've got the World Cup going on, and, like, yeah, just the idea that everyone can rally around something, like, so positive, and it's like, why can't we...
Yeah, it shows how... like universal these stories are too. There was just a World Cup video a couple days ago of Japan and Senegal, people from those teams singing the One Piece theme song together.
Nice.
Which is a song all about like friendship and shared goals and common interests.
Yeah.
Like that is amazing.
Yeah, seeing entire like stadiums sing like "Chala Head Chala" has got to be like the greatest like thing on earth.
Maybe at this year's World Series, they'll all sing the Cheers theme song or something.
even if Boston doesn't make it,
especially if Boston doesn't make it.
But yeah, man, always a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, these could easily go for like
thanks for having
2-3 hours.
Yeah, I'm bummed I won't be going to San Diego. Any idea if you're doing New York in October?
Possibly. I'm just doing like a few panels for Viz, so it depends on if like it makes sense for the budget to fly me all the way across the country for 2 hours at work.
Sure.
But we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, man. Well, yeah. Well, David, thanks again for coming on our show, and as always, you're welcome back on anytime, man.
Yeah, we can make this a quarterly engagement.
Definitely.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.